My name is Ben Stone. I am the new Clint Myers, your new regional sales manager. So today's presentation is a tidy little presentation on state of affairs in the world, how third-party primary coverage insurance helps protect travelers and helps navigate advisors to do the same. So we'll jump right in here. Travelex Insurance, who are we? We are part of Zurich and Covermore. Everybody knows who Zurich is. Covermore is a Australian-based company who is our direct parent company. Our underwriter, who writes the checks, who assumes the risk, that is Berkshire Hathaway. Most folks know Berkshire because of Warren Buffett fame, the Oracle of Omaha. That is his company and one of the arms of what he does. Travelex has over 20 years of experience, actually going close to 25 now, I would imagine, and we're always in the top 3 of third-party insurers for travelers. The unique thing about Travelex is that we have a 5-tiered support system. You can always get a hold of someone here. We have our directors, we have our account managers who assist the regional sales managers. We have sales development specialists who do behind the scenes work such as date transfers and requests for brochures, etc. And of course, we've got our phone folks known as the customer solutions team. Our typical hours of operation are 7 to 7. As your regional sales manager, I try to make myself available as long as I am awake during the day, because I know a lot of advisors and travelers are doing business at non-typical hours as trips progress. Travelex Insurance really made it simple a couple of years ago and condensed down to 2 product offerings. We have our Travel Basic and our Travel Select. The easiest way to think of this is the way it sounds. One is basic, one has a little bit better version of products and limitations. Your Travel Basic, I always like to say, is for good little cruise trips, domestic getaways, the Caribbean. When you are considering going overseas, anywhere else in the world, away from the shores of the United States, please consider Travel Select. The beauty of Travel Select is that kids 17 and under are always free with an unaccompanied adult if they have the same trip cost or less. Travel Basic, the parsed down version of our product. The beauty of this is primary coverage. No matter what you're doing, where you are, whose property you are on, when you have a policy with Travelex, you are insured. You can travel up to 30 days, and the trip cost max is $10,000 per traveler. I did want to touch, though, on that primary coverage. What that essentially means is we are first payer coverage. It is not secondary to your home-based insurer that you pay into every month, your medical provider. We do not defer to them to cover what they can and then come to us to pick up the pieces. We pay up to the limitations first before you have to go to your home insurer. That covers $15,000 in medical coverage and $100,000 in medical evacuation, which is more than enough from our experience of being a insurance provider. In the 20 odd years we've been in business, our largest evac was roughly $210,000 out of Antarctica. Truly a rescue of a person in a crevasse on an iceberg, helicopters, planes involved, etc. I know evacuation is always a big component and a concern for travelers. So if there's ever a clarification needed, certainly reach out to me, okay? Travel Basic also covers financial default of the supplier. The rules on that is it has to be outside of a 14-day window from date of purchase of our plan. And it truly means no matter who you are booked with, if a supplier financially defaults and you cannot perform your trip because of that, there's coverage for that. We also have cancel for business reasons. Do you have to work? Is your company unsuitable for business? Have you been promoted? Any of that can cause a snafu in your travel arrangements, simply reach out to us, explain the situation, we'll get the documentation. You can always transfer your trip as well, but if you need to file a claim because you don't know when you will be able to go again, that is an option. And all of our plans do have a 15-day review period. Basically, that's a buyer remorse clause. If I buy a policy today, starting tomorrow, I've got 15 full calendar days to review whether or not I want the product. That will give me a chance to read over the policy, the fine print. A lot of times you'll find as an advisor and as a traveler yourself that we don't reference fine print until we think something needs to be done. It's not the most exciting reading, but it is pertinent. Our Travel Select plan is our more robust and the most popular plan. It too is primary coverage. The beauty of this is we go from 30 days of travel clear up to 364 days of travel. There are certain states whose legislatures control how insurance is performed in their state. I'll give you an example. Florida doesn't allow you to buy a Travelex policy and travel more than 90 days. I don't know why. That's a law in their state books. We need to conform to that. When you go to register a Travelex policy, when you go to get a quote for yourself or your travelers, as long as you always put in your state of residency, the accurate information will pop up, what the limitations are, what the upgrades available are. Trips are for up to $100,000 per traveler on the policy with an aggregate limit of $200,000 total. If you ever have a policy that goes over $200,000, not a problem. We've got ways to offer ancillary coverage that works with your select policy. And again, as I mentioned earlier, kids 17 and under are always free under an adult chaperone on the policy. We all know across the states that 18 and older is considered an adult. So keeping that in mind, whenever you're looking at policies for families, while basic may be the cheaper product, if you've got young kids 17 and under, Travel Select will always win because you're not going to pay a premium on those children. And that also includes grandparents taking grandkids on a vacation, or maybe you're taking the neighbor kid along with your own children on a vacation. Kids can all be included on those policies with the adults. One of the neat features we just rolled back out is pregnancy coverage. It used to be where you had to have a high-risk pregnancy in order for coverage. Now, if you become pregnant after a policy is in place, you can cancel because of that reason. Financial default, we already went over. I'm going to touch on the pre-existing medical condition exclusion waiver in a couple slides. We'll clear that one up. Now, you always have a $50,000 emergency medical per traveler, primary coverage with Travel Select. That can be upgraded to $100,000. Your $500,000 emergency medical evacuation can also be boosted up for a cost to $1 million. I do stand by my statement where I do believe $500,000 is always more than enough, unless you get really creative about an evac. Cancel for business reasons are also included in the Select. And of course, we also have the 15-day review period. The Select plan, I wanted to include this slide because this is really the most common benefits that people lean on. You, of course, have your trip cancellation and interruption. What does that mean? Cancellation, you have not departed on your trip yet. You have to cancel. There are covered reasons, 21 of them to be exact, that fall into the benefit structure. Your interruption reason, perhaps you are on vacation, something happens back home, you need to return, a medical event happens to you, you need to be hospitalized and eventually return. That's where that goes. Your trip delay benefit. A very good example of that right now is what if you are quarantined because of a possible COVID exposure? You would have trip delay benefits. Your license fee reimbursement, That's for big game hunting. If you sell hunting trips, go on one and you have to buy an expensive tag license. That's where that comes in. Obviously, we all know a misconnection, baggage and personal effects being lost. That same thing applies to the sporting equipment delay. Medical and dental expenses, we went over that. Dental always has a sublimit of $750. You've got your evac and repatriation. Yes, should a traveling companion or any other traveler pass away while on travels, repatriation is part of the evac cost. And your accidental death and dismemberment. A couple morbid lines, but they are essential because it happens quite frequently. Your travel assistance and concierge, we'll get into that in a minute as well. The most common reason that people cancel their vacations is medical. Everything is fine. Something happens shortly before takeoff. And when I say takeoff, I mean just departing on your trip. When anybody ever files a medical claim, there will always be documentation needed with your primary care provider. I'm sorry if you hear that background noise here. We also treat COVID as medical. We'll get into that in a second as well. Cancellation reasons also include environment, and by that we mean natural disasters and such, political violence, your work, as we discussed, and many other reasons I'll show you on another slide. So the upgrades, depending on what state you live in, you can do your accidental death and dismemberment on a common carrier only, your adventure sports upgrade, car rental, and your medical upgrade. This slide really puts everything I just told you into perspective. As you can see, the robustness of our Travel Select policy. And one thing I want everybody on this presentation to do is scan the left-hand side in case you have any questions that you can relay to Ryan and we can discuss in a few minutes if you need clarification. But as you can see, Travel Select covers everything. These are all reasons for cancellation and interruption, where basic is half of that list, okay? And I'm not necessarily, I don't want to suck up a lot of time going through every single line item, which is why I want anybody to say, okay, Ben, can we clarify on this when the time comes? And Ryan, I'll let you navigate if you have any questions on that, of course. The biggest elephant in the room right now is COVID-19. We have all felt the effects in quite a negative way in our industry. Travelex always has treated COVID as a sickness. It is no different than snapping your ankle, having a heart attack, needing surgery, okay? Again, your trip cancellation and interruption, it's a sickness. Do you have to quarantine? Is there a possible death as a result of it? What I want you to focus on is the big question always is, hey, Ben, what if I test positive 3 days before I'm supposed to depart? Get that documented, and you can file a claim for a cancellation, or of course, work with your advisor, and you can rearrange your trip, talk to your suppliers, take it another time when you're healthy and able to travel and cleared for takeoff by a medical professional. All right. Ben, what if I am 5 days into my 8-day trip and I am told that I need to quarantine at a hotel for 10 days? That sends me beyond my original anticipated return date home. The good news is the policy will continue with you. It will provide you coverages in that event until you are actually back in your home city. Travel Select offers a trip delay benefit up to $750. Now, if you're staying at a relatively cheap place, that $750 may cover everything. I anticipate for many travelers, it will not cover the entire bill if the resort or your supplier is not going to help you out. Unfortunately, we cannot cover the entire amount. This is a named traveler peril policy where we do have to have limitations. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be talking today because underwriters would be sitting at $0 in the bank accounts. So that's why there are limitations, okay? On a couple slides prior to this, I mentioned pre-existing conditions. This is often a complicated discussion on how to really clarify, but I think we nailed it at the bottom of the slide. A pre-existing condition is an injury, sickness, or any other condition that the traveler experienced within the 60-day period prior to buying a Travelex insurance policy that may cause them to interrupt or cancel their trip. So the rule of thumb, whenever you buy a travel policy, is be fit for travel at time of purchase. Why do we buy insurance? Because we don't know what's coming around the corner at us, right? We don't know what life is going to throw at us. That's why we have car, health, auto, life, travel. This pre-existing condition is given to the traveler as long as they buy a policy within 15 days of their initial trip deposit. We consider a deposit an exchange of monies from traveler to a supplier, any component of the trip. Okay. So again, if something happened 61 days ago and I buy a policy today, Travelex is not going to care. And this always just comes down to when somebody is filing a medical claim for cancellation or interruption. No other covered reasons. But to finish on that, I just thought of one more thing. The bottom line is this is a protection for the traveler, not for the underwriter. This waives the underwriter's right to look more than 60 days into the medical history of a passenger, okay? Financial default, again, in that 15-day window, if you purchase the policy, you are granted financial default, but the default must occur more than 14 days after the policy effective date. So if I buy a policy today, my effective date is midnight, all right? It starts tomorrow morning. So I've got a 14-day window where I cross my fingers that none of the suppliers I'm dealing with go bankrupt. Obviously, I want to go on my trip. Travel protection also offers assistance and concierge services. We're going to touch on this briefly. World Travel Protection is our partner. In the past, it was On Call International. With our new products at the turn of the year, we partnered with World Travel Protection with Zurich. They have nearly 30 years of assisting global travelers. And really what this comes down to is this is the number if you are in a bind in a country you are unfamiliar with and you need assistance. And it doesn't matter what it is. I want you to think of a concierge at a hotel. Where's a restaurant? Where do I go to get a new passport? Where's the nearest hospital? Can you get me this? Think of it. World Travel Protection is there to help the traveler. And here we go. The travel assistance services most commonly used: transportation arrangements, prescription assistance, that happens a lot, consulting and monitoring, emergency medical payments. Let's say you end up in a hospital. Remember what I said, this is primary care. So depending on the scenario, if you're not feeling well and you walk into a hospital and say, I have Travelex insurance, here's my confirmation of coverage. You can call World Travel Protection Services, and they have boots on the ground in all countries and all cities where they will arrange to have somebody come and write checks, translate, etc. Okay. There are also times where you don't have a choice. There's an injury that is catastrophic enough where they need to rush you in. You can pick up the pieces later. And that comes in the claim process as well. Get a bill, pay for a bill, submit a claim. It doesn't always have to be done up front. It really depends on the real-time situation, okay? Travelex just came out about a week and a half ago with a very nice app. It's a travel app that is all in real time. It's applicable to your basic and your select policy. It's run with WTP in mind, World Travel Protection. This is what's neat about it, and I did a demo on it. It's really easy to use. You go to the App Store, you download it, you put your policy in, and that recognizes exactly what is on your agenda with the information that was provided. It also gives you ratings, health and safety of the destinations, requirements to enter the country, requirements to exit the country, communications and transportations. The neatest feature, I think, right now, especially with travelers being more cognizant than ever of their surroundings, is real-time safety notifications based on your actual location. And that comes down to the COVID, the transportation, terrorist incidents, any kind of a travel bans or interruptions. And it has an SOS button where you pick up your phone, you push that SOS button, and that's going to immediately contact you to World Travel Protection, which I love that, because then that means I don't have to go looking for a card and dial out. This slide is really just putting things in perspective of why buy. It's really a summary slide, and it could be as far, your supplier went bankrupt, you have to work, coronavirus, I've tested positive, and other medical conditions. One thing I want you to remember, and I think you've all experienced this to some degree in the last year and couple months, is insurers do not cover fear of travel. Okay. And it's happened a lot where people say, well, I've got a travel booked for a hot spot. We cannot cover that. We've got so many covered cancelable reasons, but when somebody is truly fearful of going to the destination that seemed okay at the time of booking, I really want you to consider rearranging travel. We will always work with our policies to transfer them to a different trip. It could be a cheaper trip, a more expensive trip, a different destination. We are going to do everything we possibly can with insurance regulations to ensure that that policy is able to manage the new trip that might be booked for your travelers. Okay. Claims. We make claims very, very simple. We have an app. You can do it on the go. Most people, if they need to make a claim because of an incident while traveling, will wait till they get home to process it. You truly have about a year to document a claim. You can do it on the app, the website. You can mail it in, you can fax it in, you can call it in. Obviously, the payment methods, traditional checks, most people like EFT. That speeds up the process to get their monies back. And of course, PayPal is an easy option as well. Look, folks, I'm trying to leave a few minutes for questions that I can answer.
Perfect.
I appreciate the time. Ryan, I yield.
You bet. Thank you, Ben. And I am going to run through some questions here. You answered pretty closely, but I'm going to go ahead and reiterate it because some of our attendees asked it before you answered it, and I just want to make sure they hear.
Of course.
But bottom line for everybody here, I'm not going to say if, I know you have questions. If we don't resolve them, don't go away unsatisfied. Click on the chat button when we're all done with Travelex, and you'll see a link. Click on that link. It's going to take you to a Zoom meeting room. Ben will be in that meeting room. He's going directly there. So get these other questions answered as you wish. So let's ask them. Here we go. I've got a cruise booked, and I get denied at the pier boarding. If let's say I have a Travelex policy and I get denied at the pier, you can't come on for a various reason. Maybe it's a COVID symptom or something to that effect. Can you address how the policy would kick in at that point?
It really won't. And the reason why is somebody's hunch. Think of it the same thing as a heat gun going to your forehead at a boarding. That is not a true medical diagnosis. If you're denied entry, we cannot control that entity making that decision. We cannot ensure that. It's no different than a country closing its borders. We can't insure against that. Now, if their hunch turns out accurate, you go have a COVID test, then you got a medical situation. You can claim the test.
If you're denied boarding because you failed an actual regulated test, then you would have medical proof.
Agreed.
And I think I would like to address our attendee. Most of the cruise lines, as you're thinking cruise, are moving towards vaccination being the starting point
Mhm.
for entry, and it's not reliant on the test. The vaccination is where it starts. So I think if you think of it that way, but further questions, you can ask Ben more on that. If I've had, and I think you've answered this, if I've got a travel policy of a trip that's been now canceled or postponed because of a government law not opening borders, and you've rolled the policy forward, will you continue to roll that policy forward as long as it was attached to a trip that I had nothing to do with the cancellation?
Sure. What I encourage you to do, we are technically on our third date transfers. It had started
Right.
out as 1, went to 2, now we're at 3. Here's what you need to do as an advisor or as a traveler. We need to know that your policy needs to be put on hold. Okay. What that means is you're in a gray zone where there's no trip to insure unless we know new details. Again, we are going to work with you to make that trip happen, change it to a different travel style, etc. We're trying to not be in the way of having everybody's
Yeah.
party ruined.
All right, we appreciate that. Does medical coverage include dental?
It does. $750 limit.
Excellent, thank you. And then you covered this. This will be our last one, but I do think it's one to reiterate. Travelex, and they're not alone in this. There isn't any insurance coverage company out there that will cover you because you're afraid to go somewhere. There would have to be a government mandate that says you are not allowed to enter, you're not allowed to leave, or something to that effect, right? So the word, wow, it's looking iffy, or
Yeah.
things are spiking, or there's a chance it could be difficult for me, that's where Travelex isn't going to just refund all your money because you just are worried because you have a condition and you've looked at the data and you're, oh, I'm a little iffy on this. It's got to be documentable from an entity like a government.
Okay. Couple different ways to go on that quickly.
Okay.
No, it's what I mentioned at the very end. We do not cover fear of travel. And we do not, have not, never will, and neither do other insurance providers. We cannot insure against border closures by any government authority. Okay. That's when, as the advisor, we start looking, where can these folks go? Put it on hold. Right. Let's change design of a trip.
Yeah, assign the policy to a different trip, different
Agreed.
Destination, different timeline.
That's not a claimable opportunity for the traveler. And one thing I always try to promote is do the research before you make a claim, because once you want to wrap that package, you've spent that money on your claim where you could have used it somewhere else. Do the research to find out if it's even viable before going down that route.
Excellent. I know there's a lot more to dive into, Ben, and thank you for trying to get this in
yeah.
But click on that link. Ben's going to click on that link as well right now and go directly to the meeting room. All of you that do have questions, please feel free. He will get you answers today, or will make a connection with you to provide the information to you. So this is important enough for us to make sure that you know where to go.